Mr. Zakheim, let me start with you, if I could. President Biden has thus far withheld sanctions against Russia's energy sector. Do you think that might have something to do with our own reliance and global reliance on Russia's energy exports?
Yes, Senator.
Do you think it was wise for this president, when he came to office, to throttle down America's energy production, to end new leases on oil and gas exploration, to cancel pipelines in this country, to permit new drilling to go forward? Do you think that was a wise geostrategic position to take?
No, Senator. If it increased reliance on Russian oil or Iranian oil, definitely not.
Do you think that the United States should allow itself now to remain dependent, increasingly dependent on Russian exports of energy, and allow our allies like Germany Germany, I think, currently imports 55% of its natural gas, at least, from Russia. Is that a situation that we should acquiesce in, continue to acquiesce in?
No, we shouldn't rely on that, and we should encourage our allies not to either.
What about our own energy independence? Is, in your view, again, just put aside our galloping inflation in this country brought about by the president's policies, put aside the prices that Americans are paying at the gas pump every single day, just from a geostrategic point of view, shouldn't it be a priority for this country to restore our own energy independence, to become, again, a major net exporter of energy globally, and to try to become the world's major supplier, number one supplier of energy in the world? I mean, don't you think that's a geostrategic priority at this point?
It's a clear priority and interest, and one that we should pursue.
Well, I agree with you, and that's why I've introduced legislation that would roll back this administration's shutdown of our energy sector. I think it has proven to be a geostrategic disaster. We're seeing it play out before us in Ukraine. We're seeing it in the inflation that Americans are facing, and to my mind, given the confluence of events in Europe now, there's nothing that we could do that is probably more important than a combination of sanctions that would throttle down the Russian energy sector and throttle up our energy production to the fullest possible extent. Let me switch theaters for a moment with you, Mr. Zakheim, and talk about Asia, which is our pacing theater, and then about China, which is our pacing threat. The National Defense Strategy Commission, on which you served, emphasized the importance of combat-credible forces deployed forward to deter enemy aggression in the Indo-Pacific. I think one of the lessons that we have to face about the latest aggression, the Russian aggression that we see in Ukraine, is that deterrence failed. I mean, we are in the midst of a massive invasion because this administration did not successfully deter Russia. We can't allow that same situation to replay itself in the Indo-Pacific with regard to Taiwan. So my question is, should we wait to support Taiwan with military and lethal aid the way that we waited back in 2014, for example, to support Ukraine until after Russia actually conducted its first invasion into Ukrainian territory? Should we wait, or should we act now with regard to Taiwan in terms of supplying vital aid?
Senator, I agree with your analysis. I don't think we should wait. I think it's not entirely analogous, Ukraine, Taiwan. I think Taiwan could do more in terms of paying for their own support and aid. But I think some of the legislation that you support here in the Senate and others in the House of Representatives are pushing forward in terms of a robust package ought to be pursued.
I'm glad you mentioned Taiwan's ability to pay. Would you agree with me it is absolutely vital that we send the message to Taiwan that they can and must increase their own defense spending, they must invest in vital defensive capabilities, and that we can help them do that, but that we should condition our aid and help on them stepping forward to invest in those vital systems capabilities and their own military readiness?
The Taiwan needs to make an investment in their own defense. How they invest is also important, Senator. So it's not just the total dollar amount, but where they pursue those investments. So it complements a coherent strategy that can affect the deterrence that we seek and they seek.
Yeah, very good. I agree with all of that, and I think the time to act on that is now so that we can maintain a deterrent posture. Ms. Conley, I'm running out of time, but I want to ask you in relationship to both Europe and Asia, sort of thinking about those two together. There's been a lot of discussion about European nations doing more to project power into the Indo-Pacific. And I'm sure there's no doubt that some could do more, the United Kingdom, for instance, maybe France. But in general, isn't it more important, given the current crisis in Ukraine and the crisis on the European continent, to urge our European allies to focus their military resources on Europe and to ask them to do more in Europe while we focus increasingly on the Indo-Pacific? In other words, isn't it, given the conflict that we're seeing in Europe and the great potential for conflict in Asia, that we pursue this sort of burden sharing and ask them to prioritize first their own theater and focus on that?
Well, European allies are going to concentrate on their own theater, their own protection, but the U.S. needs to be engaged in the European theater as well as in the Indo-Pacific theater, and we should then encourage our European allies to equally be engaged in the Indo-Pacific. In some ways, these two theaters are coming together. We are dealing with two authoritarians that want to establish a sphere of influence and push the United States and international law out. We have responsibility for both. We have to figure out the mechanisms of how our allies do more, and we support them, not us doing it for them entirely.
Yeah, very good. And I'll end with that, Mr. Chairman. I think that last part is well said, Ms. Connolly. I agree with you. We have in this country our own limited resources. We have to prioritize. We do need partners and allies, and we've got to figure out a balance where we ask our partners and allies to do what they can do to focus on what security threats are most pressing to them. Surely for the Europeans, that is Europe right now. And we've got to maintain our own strategic focus, which is first our pacing theater, Asia, then Europe, and we've got to work with our allies and partners to meet the challenges in both, is my view. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.